So when it comes to like EC2 instance types, every time I come back to AWS, there's always a load more been added. What would be your advice here? Because obviously you've got your T2 as your general, but there's a lot of specialized ones there. How do you help identify if you should be using a different type of instance type?
Yeah, so a little bit how I mentioned earlier, if you know what your constraining factor is, so if it's RAM, if it's CPU, it could be disk I/O. These are the things to look at. So if you're running out of CPU faster than you're running out of memory, then consider the CPU optimized instances. This will go a long way to that. So if you've got a clear constraining factor, that's a good baseline to think about. When you run containers, sometimes if you have very mixed different container workloads, that constraining factor might not be so obvious, because they actually balance each other out, at least to some degree. So then, kind of an M instance is a great place to start. And then thinking about when to use the M's and the T's, that's kind of a difficult sort of equation to think of sometimes. But definitely think about how much of that CPU credits that you're using, and there'll be a tipping point where it just makes sense to run it on a dedicated piece of compute. And also as well, the AMD instances that got released. So if you've got software that can basically is a runtime software like JavaScript or Python, or you can compile it against the AMD architecture, then you can take advantage of the C5As and the M5As and run that same program with a same workload with a discount, basically because the instance is slightly cheaper to run as well.
Okay, great. John, anything out for that one?
Yeah, so there's your question there is almost identical to one of the questions on the well-architected framework in the performance section, which is how do you select your compute solution, and more or less what Rob's described is sort of the way to go about doing that. I think the thing that we see when we meet customers and talk to them about what they're doing and how they're choosing things, the biggest problem really is that there is a lot of choice, and it's not always clear. That people don't often spend the time that they need to spend looking at those different choices and understanding the different trade-offs. For example, a lot of businesses, when the T2 instances were first available, were using those for pretty much everything. And the T2 instance is designed really for bursty workloads. So if you get a period of time where you need quite a lot of compute, and then most of the time you have a background of not very much, T2 instances are great. But if your compute workload is consistently sort of moderate to high, then you drain the T2 instance of its compute tokens essentially, and everything slows down and gets really confusing, and nobody really knows that's how that works. So they're looking at the pricing, going, oh, T2, that was pretty cheap, let's use that. Really, there's a lot of nuance in how you select those things, and becoming familiar with the ecosystem by reading the docs. Maybe I'm going to mercenarily say engage with a partner who can help you make those decisions. But there's a lot of complexity there. The platform is big and pretty unwieldy, and your first time out, you're going to get it wrong. There's no question about that.